So I don't know if on section B, the 12 marker is going to be just about the debate, or if it's going to be really sneaky and ask you for the strengths and weaknesses of an approach in psychology. So I'm going to just pick one at random. When I've had a look at this that we did in class, the one that's kind of a good one to show you as an example is the social approach. So we're going to do that one. It might be a really, really straightforward question, and it might say, discuss the strengths and weaknesses of viewing behaviour from a social approach. And then obviously using, as it say, support can be used in your evidence from the core studies. It'll always have that on, so it's pretty straightforward in that sense. So it might say something like that. I'm trying to think how else it might be worded. It might say something like, discuss the extent to which behaviour could be viewed from the social approach. I think that would be kind of that would be a horrible question. You wouldn't really have enough points to talk about that. Unless you used another approach to contrast it. So if it was discussed the extent to which behaviour could be viewed from a social approach, let me just write that down. I'd have to put validly, maybe. Validly. I probably wouldn't word it like that though. Right, we'll do the first one and then I'll see if I can do the second one later on. If I can't do it, then it's too hard for you to do it. So, I'd be able to do it, but it might take me more than the time that's allotted, and therefore it'll be too difficult to ask you. But anyway, you start this question the same as the debate one. So you might start off by saying, what does a social approach say about behaviour? So, the social approach would explain behaviour as being caused by the actual or implied presence of other people, and that we all behave in a social context, something like that. One strength of the social approach is that as it often so strengths and weaknesses of viewing behaviour from a social approach. That's not the right question, because the question would be discuss strengths and weaknesses of using the social approach to explain behaviour. That would be what I was planning on answering. So one strength of the social approach is that it often uses research which is conducted in natural environments, in participants, and therefore conclusions about behaviour are more ecologically valid. For example, now generally the social approach does use kind of like observations and field experiments and things like that. So that was what I would word the point like. So when next year when you study Piliavin was done on a New York subway, and you could use that as an example to support the point, because it's natural behaviour and all that kind of stuff. But the only studies that we've looked at in the social approach so far are Milgram, which is in a lab setting, and Bocciaro, which is a controlled setting. However, it's the Dutch students participants natural environment because it's their university and they're used to being in like lectures and things like that. So that's the one that we're going to use. So for example, Bocciaro. I think that's how you spell Bocciaro. Probably should check that. I've got it right. But oh, I have done right. So, for example, like up that, Bocciaro et al. Um, found that 149 Dutch students who were tested at their usual university in Amsterdam were less likely to whistleblow than obey a command from to obey when asked to say research was ethical when it wasn't. Therefore, these conclusions about behaviour are more likely to be representative of how these participants would behave, usually as they're being tested in their usual environment on a task which is familiar to them. Also, the social approach that it often uses research is conducted in participants in natural environments. Its conclusions about behaviour are more ecologically valid. For example, Bocciaro et al. Found that 149 Dutch students who were tested at their usual university in Amsterdam were less likely to whistleblow than obey when asked to say research was ethical when it wasn't. Therefore, these conclusions about behaviour are more likely to be representative of how these participants behave usually as they are being tested. The test is familiar with them, and so the social approach is more valid. However, a weakness of the social approach is that it is often unethical, as participants are often deceived and may not feel they have the right to withdraw. Participants are often deceived and may not feel they have the right to withdraw. I would actually use Bocciaro for that one. I'll leave that till later and perhaps do one where I can bring Milgram in. So, however, the weakness of the social approach is that it supports the situational side of the dispositional, is that it suggests behaviour is determined by situational factors and therefore ignores the influence of dispositional free will, dispositional factors such as free will. What's the next combination? For example, Milgram found that only 65% of participants obeyed the command of an authority figure to shock participants to 450 volts. The social would have suggested that the present that straightforward social approach suggests that all participants should behave in the same way as they are all in the same controlled setting. Yale University. Projects of participants should behave in the same way as they all in the same control setting at Yale University. It was 35% disobeyed. It implies an element of free will. Therefore, it's not completely valid at explaining behaviour. Another strength of the social approach is that if that actually should go before that one, I'm about to say, because I'm going to say that if you know that it's due to situational reasons, you can have practical applications. So the social approach is that, as it suggests, behaviour is determined by situational factors. It has practical applications. For example, Malcolm found that participants would obey an authority figure. 300 volts, and that all 40 participants would obey an authority figure up to 300 volts. When giving products such as let's continue. Therefore, this can be used in places like the army to ensure full obedience from soldiers, but also to ensure that power is not abused by generals who should reword commands, which may be, because you wouldn't get a choice, would you, in the army, whether it's from soldiers, but also to ensure in other environments, such as the workplace, that power is not abused by managers who should reword commands, which may be unethical, to allow employees to feel they have a choice in their behaviour. However, suggesting that behaviour is determined by situation factors, ignores the influence distributions of free will and I need this in here, don't I? So some of the weaknesses of the social approach. Go here. Reductionist said about natural environments and ecological. Oh, I've combined two together now, and now I don't know. Maybe I could do reductionism actually. But it depends on natural environment. Oh, we could say actually that because it's a natural environment, there's less controls over extraneous variables, but OCR was quite controlled, wasn't it? Can't really use that one. See, again, polyarvin would be a really good one because you could say, you know, you can't control who's on the subway train and things like that. Can't really, we'll have to go with reductionism because we don't have much choice than anything else. Has practical applications. Determines, ignores decision free will. But then that's kind of ignoring just that is reductionist. Oh, let's just go, okay. However, a weakness of the social approach is that it could be, is that it is reductionist, as it reduces the explanation of behaviour down to the component and part of social environment. And therefore, and thus is simplistic in its explanations. For example, so we do not know them, let's have a shot. So for example, the students in Bocciaro, the students in Bocciaro may have been more likely to obey than disobey and whistleblow due to their biology. Due to their biology or development still kind of social, isn't it? Due to their biology or behaviour is still quite social, or cognition, biology or cognition, which are dispositional influences. And therefore by taking just a social approach, it is not a valid way of explaining their behaviour. So we've got natural environment but reductionist. I was going to do ethics. I was going to say that social. Oh, but yeah, but if you said social research is unethical, it's usually unethical because in the participant's natural environment, so they might not feel like they have a right to withdraw and they might not have informed consent and things like that. But generally, the studies that we've got, like Bocciaro did give the participants right to withdraw, and so did Milgram implied. And Milgram is a natural environment anyway, so you can't really use that. So those are kind of the ones that I would probably use. And then you'd obviously sum it up. That's actually a really hard question. So I can't, with those studies is really hard. Like last year, they used to ask this question, but we had polyarvin, and it was a lot easier to, answer those questions, because it wasn't an actual environment, and you could talk about ethical issues and things like that. It was pretty straightforward. So again, I can't see them asking you that, but you never know, they could be really mean. If you had like cognitive approach, you could be saying like, experimental methodology allows for causality, but because you've got Lotus and Palmer and Grant, but then that lacks ecological validity, so it's probably not a great thing to do. You can say things like it's quite reductionist, but then establishing causality and stuff would be within the experiment point, but you could say that you can't falsify it, you can't operationalise it, so is it really that valid? And then you can actually talk about practical applications. So cognitive would be a really easy one to do, that would be quite good. And you answer it in a similar way to the one we've just done. Behaviourist, you can say that it's quite scientific because it's got experimental methodology, and it establishes causality similar to that point over there. And you can talk about practical applications like treatments for phobias, but then you can say it's deterministic, it doesn't allow for free will, and it's quite also reductionist because it doesn't explain like your cognition and things like that, your biology. So that would be quite a good one. They probably ask you that one. Biology, again, scientific, laboratory experimentation. You can establish causality. I said that already, probably. You can falsify it because it's like right there, reducing it down to component parts. But then you're not explaining the impact on cognition and social individual differences. It's got practical applications, that would be a strength. And then another weakness again would be determinism. You've got no free will over it, so it's got ethical problems like labelling. So actually the biological approach would be a really good one that they might ask you as well, because they've got a lot of stuff that they can ask you. Developmental would be things like, okay, we've got longitudinal case study methodology, qualitative data. You can see changes in behaviour over time, it's more valid. You can talk about like Freud in that one. Perhaps unethical because you've got child samples. Another weakness would be that it lacks population validity because of the child samples again. You can't explain adults' behaviour. You can't say stacked-up methodology because we've just said about longitudinal, so it's mirroring a point, so you can put that. You could say things like maybe you can't falsify it because it's a lot of things like your development, maybe in your mind, like your cognition and stuff like that, or the impact of social or whatever. You can't really falsify that. Can you really measure that? Is that observable? Not as much so as biological. You can say it's a strength of holism, because you're looking at lots of different explanations for behaviour. We mentioned this before when we said about Cheney's study could be behaviourist, could be social learning theory, could be developmental over time. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into things that you could perhaps talk about. The similar points, just going to make sure you're linking it back to that approach, and then be good. What I'll do is I will save this and put it on the Google Drive. I was going to talk about this one, but the points, if you think about it, validly from the social approach, you can say, well, it could be valid if it's in an ecologically valid environment. A natural environment which makes it ecologically valid, but it might not be valid because it's reductionist. But it could be valid if it's reductionist because you're more scientific. Establishing causality and that kind of thing. It's going to be valid if you've got practical applications because if the treatments work, then it's valid. But then if it's say you're determined and people aren't determined and people are not going with what you say everyone is, then it's probably not valid. So you just basically at the end just link back to that question and say, so therefore it's not valid at explaining behaviour, or therefore it is valid at explaining behaviour. So you have to read the question and make sure you're answering that, because I can't predict what's coming up. So you've just got to kind of use these points but to answer that question. So make sure you're not just writing strengths and weaknesses, you are actually answering what the question's wanting.